Betrayal is a blade that cuts deeper than any scalpel I ever held. It's a poison that festers in your soul, a thief that steals your purpose and leaves you gasping in its wake. At 67, I, Elizabeth Marie Thompson, stood at the precipice of my life's unraveling, cast out from St. Mary's Hospital in Chicago after 40 years as an operating room nurse. My hands, weathered but steady as granite, had stitched wounds, steadied trembling patients, and cradled lives on the brink. My heart, scarred yet fierce, had poured every ounce of love into my work, into the patients who became my purpose, my family. But Ethan Carter, the new manager, with his tailored suits, Ivy League smirk, and eyes cold as a Lake Michigan winter, decided I was expendable. "Time to retire, Elizabeth," he said, his voice slicing through me like a Chicago wind. I overheard him later, his words venomous, dripping with disdain, as he whispered to Dr. Reynolds, the lead surgeon, "Why keep this dinosaur? She's a liability, dragging my department into the dark ages." Those words didn't just wound, they shattered me, splintering my identity, leaving a gaping hole where my purpose once stood. But this isn't a tale of surrender. This is an epic odyssey of redemption, of clawing back meaning from the ashes of despair, of forging a family through pain so raw it could break you. Hold tight, dear listener, because this story will seize your heart, twist it, and never let go. It's a journey through betrayal, loss, and a love so unshakable it defied death itself. Love that rebuilt me from the ground up, the day they forced me out. St. Mary's transformed into a cathedral of gratitude, a sanctuary of memories that could have warmed the iciest soul. The surgical ward, my home for 4 decades, became a stage for a farewell that felt both sacred and unbearable. A long banquet table, draped in crisp white linen, sagged under the weight of a towering fruit and cream cake, its frosting spelling, "Out Elizabeth," the soul of our ward in elegant, looping script. My colleagues' faces etched with shared nights of saving lives, of holding each other through the chaos of code blues and trauma bays gathered around, their eyes glistening with love and loss. They raised glasses of sparkling cider, the clinks echoing like church bells in a quiet chapel. Dr. Margaret Hayes, our cardiologist, her cheeks flushed with emotion, stood tall, her voice trembling but resolute. "Liz," she said, her words heavy with reverence, "you're not just a nurse. You're the heartbeat of this ward, a lighthouse guiding us through every storm. Your hands have saved countless lives. Your heart has carried us all. To your health, your legacy, and the fire in your soul that never dims." The room erupted in cheers, a symphony of hooray that wrapped me in warmth even as my chest tightened with grief. I sat at the head of the table, clutching an untouched glass of Chardonnay, its golden glow mocking my turmoil. "Thank you, my darlings," I managed, my voice cracking as tears welled, threatening to spill over. "This hospital, you're the pulse of my life, the family I chose when fate denied me my own." I couldn't finish. The weight of leaving my purpose, my sanctuary, choked me silent. A lump of nostalgia and loss swelling in my throat until it felt like I might suffocate. Now, let me pull you into my world, dear listener. Because this story isn't just mine, it's yours, too. It's for every soul who's ever felt discarded, every heart that's ached for purpose. If you're watching, pause for a moment. Drop a comment below. Tell me where you're tuning in from. Whether you're in a bustling city or a quiet town, whether you've hit that subscribe button or given this a like, your support breathes life into this tale, and I promise, every word will hold you captive, tugging at your deepest emotions until the very end. This is a story that demands to be felt, and I need you with me for every heartbeat of it. I wasn't ready to go. My hands, calloused but precise, still yearned to thread sutures under the harsh glare of ore lights, to steady trembling patience as monitors beeped and lives hung in the balance. My heart thrummed with a fierce need to be needed, to stand in the breach between life and death, to be the calm in someone's storm. I'd given everything to St. Mary's: sleepless nights, skipped meals, endless overtime shifts through Chicago's brutal winters and sweltering summers. I'd held dying children, comforted grieving families, and fought alongside surgeons to pull miracles from the jaws of tragedy. But Ethan Carter, fresh from some glass-towered office in the Loop, saw me as a relic, a dusty artifact in his shiny new vision. On his first day, I caught his gaze, cold and dismissive, sizing me up like a used car past its prime. "She can't keep up," he whispered to Dr. Reynolds in the hallway outside the OR, his voice low but cutting. We don't need a museum piece clogging my department. I fled to the break room, locking the door behind me, my sobs echoing off the tiled walls. My chest burned, my blood pressure spiking for the first time in years, a betrayal that felt physical. It wasn't just the job, it was the annihilation of my identity. 40 years of saving lives reduced to a cruel, whispered verdict. I was disposable, my legacy trampled under his polished loafers. My life had never been a straight path, smooth and predictable like the suburban streets of Lincoln Park where I lived. My husband, James, and I had dreamed of a house filled with children's laughter, of bedtime stories, scraped knees, and Sunday mornings sticky with pancake syrup. We tried everything: fertility clinics in Evanston, specialists in New York, countless nights praying under the stars in our backyard, the Chicago skyline twinkling in the distance. We'd lie on a blanket, James's arm around me, whispering about the family we'd build, the names we'd choose, Michael, Sophie. But our arms stayed empty, the nursery a silent shrine to hopes that never bloomed. Each negative test, each doctor's solemn shake of the head, chipped away at us. I poured my grief into St. Mary's, vowing to save others if I couldn't build the family I craved. Every patient I helped, every life I touched, became a piece of that unfulfilled dream, a surrogate child, a fleeting connection I'd hold. Their hands whisper comfort and feel a flicker of purpose reignite. But 7 years ago, cancer stole James, leaving a void as vast as Lake Michigan. I buried my pain in work, taking extra shifts, scrubbing in for emergencies, anything to drown the silence of my empty home. I'd fall asleep on the break room couch, the hum of the hospital lulling me, a temporary escape from the grief that waited at home. But now, even that lifeline was severed. Retirement wasn't freedom, it was a sentence to irrelevance, a slow suffocation in a house that echoed with ghosts. Each morning, I'd wake with the instinct to rush to St. Mary's, my body still wired for the rhythm of the hospital alarms, the scent of antiseptic, the urgency of a trauma call. I'd reach for my scrubs, only to remember I had nowhere to go. My house, a 2-story brick colonial on North Cleveland Avenue, once alive with James's laughter and his Coltrane records spinning on the turntable, was now a tomb of silence. I'd wander its rooms, tracing the edges of furniture we'd picked out together, a walnut dining table, a faded armchair where he'd read me poetry. The emptiness clawed at me, a reminder that I'd lost not just my husband, but my purpose, my reason to keep going. My neighbors, with their manicured lawns and book club gossip, noticed my withdrawal. "Liz looks off," they'd murmur over coffee at Bourgeois Pig Calf, their voices dripping with pity. "She's not herself since the hospital let her go." I didn't care. Their world of potlucks and PTA meetings felt like a foreign country. I was a ghost, haunting my own life, waiting for the clock to run out. One chilly November evening in 2025, I sat by the fireplace, the crackle of logs my only companion. I flipped through our old photo album, my fingers lingering on a black and white wedding. Picture James and me, young and radiant, his eyes promising forever. "Jimmy, my love, how I miss you," I whispered, my voice breaking. A sudden, searing pain stabbed my abdomen, doubling me over. I gasped, clutching my side, willing it to pass. I swallowed a painkiller, paced the hardwood floors of my living room, the Chicago skyline glinting through the window. I told myself it was stress, grief manifesting in my body. But the pain returned, fiercer, a relentless beast gnawing at my insides. I didn't want to face St. Mary's as a patient, not after being its warrior, but I had no choice. I drove to the hospital, the familiar route, through Lakeview, now alien, my hands shaking on the wheel. After a battery of tests, blood draws, CT scans, an endoscopy that left my throat wry, sat in Dr. Michael Bradley's office, the sterile walls closing in. His face was a mask of regret, his eyes avoiding mine as he studied my chart. "Elizabeth, I won't sugarcoat it," he said, his voice heavy. "Your results are dire. Pancreatic cancer, stage 4, 6 months, maybe less." My heart stopped, the room spinning. Why me? I thought, tears burning my eyes. I've given my life to others, held their hands through their darkest hours. Why this punishment? I stumbled out, collapsing on a bench in Grand Park, the city's hum drowned by my sobs. I wept until my chest ached, the weight of my mortality crushing me. The world felt like a collapsing tunnel. No light, no hope, just a death sentence hanging over me like a guillotine. Days bled into a gray haze, each one a slow descent into despair. Depression sank its claws deep, leaving me hollow, exhausted. I'd lie in bed, staring at the ceiling, the ticking of my grandfather clock mocking me with every second I had left. I'd always been the one to comfort others, to hold their fears at bay, but now I was drowning in my own. Flashbacks haunted me, patients I'd lost, their faces blending with James's, their final breaths echoing in my mind. I'd see myself in their place, fading in a hospital bed, alone. My neighbors' whispers grew louder, their pity stifling. Poor Liz, they'd say at the farmer's market on Division Street. She's got no one now. I stopped going out, stopped answering their calls. The thought of my own end consumed me, a suffocating weight of loneliness and fear that left me gasping for air. Then, one crisp October afternoon, everything shifted. I was walking home from the Jualasco on Clark Street, my arms heavy with grocery bags, the autumn leaves crunching under my boots. The Chicago River glinted in the distance, and I felt a flicker of life despite my pain. As I passed under the rusted railway bridge near the river, I saw him, a young man, ragged and bearded, his clothes patched and faded. He knelt beside a skeletal dog, its right paw wrapped in a filthy blood-soaked rag. The dog whimpered as he gently probed its ribs, his hands trembling with care. "Hang in there, buddy," he murmured, pouring water from a cracked plastic bottle into a chipped bowl. The dog lapped it up greedily, its eyes soulful despite its pain. He stroked its head with a tenderness that stopped me cold, a raw, selfless love that cut through my despair. He looked half-starved himself, his cheeks sunken, curly hair matted under a tattered Chicago Bears cap. His eyes, a piercing blue, held a mix of exhaustion and defiance, as if daring the world to break him further. My heart shattered for them both, a raw ache that drowned out my own suffering. "What happened?" I asked, stepping closer, my voice soft but firm, my nurse's instinct kicking in. He looked up, wary but kind, his gaze searching mine for judgment. "Found him hit by a car on Ashland," he said, his voice raw with worry. "Paws busted, maybe a rib or two. Patched him up best I could, but he needs real help." His hands never left the dog, his touch steady despite his own hunger. "Why are you out here in the cold?" I pressed, my eyes tracing the thinness of his frame, the dirt smudged on his face. His gaze dropped, shoulders slumping. "No home. Been on the streets a while, just trying to keep Ranger alive." Ranger. He'd named the dog, given it dignity in a world that offered him none. A spark ignited in me, a flicker of purpose I hadn't felt since Dr. Bradley's diagnosis. It was as if James's voice whispered in my ear, urging me to act. "Come with me," I said, the words spilling out before I could stop them. "Bring Ranger. I'm a nurse, 40 years in surgery. We'll fix him up together." He hesitated, his face flushing with embarrassment. "Ma'am, you don't know me. I don't want to burden you." I smiled, a warmth spreading in my chest, thawing the ice of my grief. "Burden, son. I've got too much quiet in my life already. Let's go." His name was Daniel Cartneau, relation to the manager who'd cast me out, though the irony stung like a slap. Just 32, life had battered him like a Lake Michigan storm, relentless and cruel. We walked to my house, Ranger cradled in his arms, the dog's whimpers softening as Daniel whispered reassurances. At my kitchen table, over steaming bowls of homemade vegetable soup and crusty bread, he poured out his story, each word heavy with pain, each pause a wound reopened. His mother, Clara, was a single mom who worked herself to the bone cooking in a South Side school cafeteria by day, scrubbing its floors by night to keep him fed and clothed. Her boyfriend Roy, a deadbeat drunk, leached off her, his fists leaving bruises she hid under long sleeves. "I was 10, Daniel said, his fist clenching around his spoon, his eyes distant with rage. I'd hear her cry at night, see the marks on her arms. I wanted to throw him out, protect her, but I was too small, too weak." His voice broke, and I reached across the table, squeezing his hand, my own grief mirroring his. When Clara died, broken by years of abuse, Roy turned their apartment into a den of drunks and chaos. Black market realtors, posing as Roy's drinking buddies, got him so drunk he signed away their home. At 15, Daniel fled, surviving on Chicago's streets, scavenging for food in alleyways, sleeping in abandoned buildings near the L tracks. He briefly fell in with a crew of petty thieves, desperate for scraps, stealing wallets and shoplifting to eat. A 2-year stint in Cook County Jail for a botched burglary straightened him out. "I swore I'd never go back," he said, his voice firm, his eyes meeting mine with a quiet strength. Now I scrape by loading trucks at warehouses, cleaning lots, whatever keeps me honest. His story gutted me, each word a mirror to my own loneliness, my own sense of being discarded. But it also kindled a fire, a fierce need to protect him, to give him the home I'd lost. For the first time since my diagnosis, I wanted to live not for me, but for him. Daniel and Ranger moved in. My house, a 2-story brick colonial on North Cleveland Avenue, came alive again, its silence shattered by the clatter of tools and the soft thud of Ranger's tail. Daniel fixed the wobbly dining chairs James had promised to repair, patched the dripping bathroom faucet, and hung a new curtain rod in the living room, whistling old Motown tunes, Marvin Gaye, The Temptations as he worked. I taught him to cook James's favorite chili recipe, the kitchen filling with the scent of cumin and tomatoes, and we'd laugh over shared stories, his rough edges softening. I started calling him son, and he'd grin, his blue eyes sparkling like Lake Michigan on a clear summer day. Ranger, the scrawny dog with soulful eyes, healed under our care. I showed Daniel how to clean and rebandage the wounds, my nurse's hands guiding his, steady and sure. We fed Ranger scraps of chicken and rice, watching his ribs slowly disappear under a healthy coat. His tail began to wag again, a metronome of hope that mirrored my own rekindling spirit. But the neighbors, with their manicured lawns and suburban suspicions, whispered poison at their PTA meetings and book clubs. He's a conman, they hissed over lattes, at bourgeois pig calf waiting to rob Liz blind or worse. I ignored them, my heart fierce with trust. Daniel was family now, and family doesn't bow to gossip. Daniel's life began to bloom, a seedling breaking through concrete. At the Jewelesco he met Sarah Mitchell, a 29-year-old cashier with warm brown eyes and a smile that could melt a Chicago winter. Her hair was tied back in a messy bun, her laugh a burst of sunlight that cut through the store's fluorescent hum. They clicked instantly, stealing glances over grocery bags, their banter lighting up the checkout line like a 4th of July sparkler. Sarah would tease him about his Bears cap, and he'd fire back about her Cubs hoodie, their laughter drawing stares from customers. But Sarah carried scars, a weight that shadowed her brightness. Over coffee at my kitchen table, the scent of fresh-baked chocolate chip cookies filling the air, she told Daniel her story, her voice soft but steady. She'd married Mark in 2018, young and hopeful, believing his promises of a better life, but his drinking spiraled after their wedding, turning him into a stranger. I tried everything, she said, tears falling, her hands twisting a napkin. Rehab in Aurora, counseling in the Loop, even a church group in Oak Park. Nothing worked. When Tommy was born, I thought he'd change, be a father, but he got worse, drinking until he passed out on the couch, reeking of whiskey. One day, Mark, drunk, took their 4-year-old son, Tommy, to Lincoln Park for a carousel ride. He wandered off to buy beer at a corner store, leaving Tommy alone near the zoo. A stray dog lunged, barking and snapping, terrifying the boy. A jogger chased it off with a stick, but the damage was done. Tommy's stutter began, a halting cadence that broke Sarah's heart, and his fear of dogs took root, making him flinch at every bark. Sarah filed for divorce, fighting for custody, determined to shield her son from Mark's chaos. I just want Tommy to feel safe, she whispered, her eyes meeting Daniel's. He squeezed her hand, his own scars recognizing hers. One evening, Mark stormed into the Jewelesco, reeking of whiskey, his voice slurring as he smashed a display of canned soup, the metal clattering to the floor. Sarah, gimme money, he bellowed, knocking over a stack of Campbell's, his eyes bloodshot and wild. Daniel, restocking shelves nearby, stepped in, his voice calm but ironclad. Leave her alone, he said, pinning Mark's arm and dragging him to the door, his strength belying his thin frame. Stay away, or I'm calling the cops. Mark spat, his breath sour. You'll pay for this, punk, you're nothing but a filthy drifter. The threat hung like a storm cloud over Lake Michigan. But Daniel stood tall, his jaw set, protecting the woman he was falling for. Sarah watched, her hands trembling, gratitude and fear warring in her eyes. That night, as we sat in my living room, Ranger curled at our feet. Sarah whispered to me, "He's different, Liz. He makes me feel safe." I nodded, my heart swelling. Daniel was becoming her lighthouse, just as he was mine. Meanwhile, my own fears clawed at me, a relentless shadow. The pain in my stomach had dulled, but I braced for the worst. I'd seen too many patients fade, their hope snuffed out by a diagnosis like mine. Pancreatic cancer was a death sentence, a ticking clock I couldn't outrun. I'd lie awake at night, imagining my final days alone in a hospital bed. No family to hold my hand. Just the sterile beep of monitors. The thought crushed me, a weight heavier than any I'd carried in the ore. Fearing my time was short, I wrote a will, leaving everything, my house, my savings, James's old jazz records, to Daniel. I called Patricia, a notary from Evanston, to finalize it. She arrived, her navy pantsuit crisp, her expression stern. "You're giving it all to a homeless guy," she snapped, her pen hovering over the document. "Liz, he's scamming you. He'll take you home and vanish." I shook my head, my voice steady as steel. "He's my son in every way that matters. He doesn't even know about the will." I wanted Daniel and Sarah to have a home, a future, a chance at the family I'd never had. Patricia sighed, signed the papers, and left, her disapproval lingering like a bad smell. I didn't care. My heart was set. Life bloomed in my house like spring after a brutal Chicago winter. Sarah and Tommy became regulars, their laughter filling the rooms, chasing away the ghosts of my loneliness. I'd read The Velveteen Rabbit to Tommy, his small body curled in my lap, his stutter softening as he giggled at the story of a toy becoming real through love. I felt like a grandmother, my heart swelling with a love I'd thought was lost forever. We'd bake chocolate chip cookies, flour dusting our noses, Tommy's eyes bright with wonder as he licked the spoon. I taught him to plant marigolds in my backyard, his small hands patting the soil, his voice halting but eager. "Will they grow, Grandma Liz?" he'd asked, and I'd kiss his forehead, my heart aching with joy. "They'll bloom, just like you, sweetheart." Sarah would leave, Tommy with me, to catch a movie with Daniel at the Logan Theater or stroll along the lakefront trail, and we'd spend hours building Lego castles or drawing pictures of Ranger. Tommy's fear of dogs easing in the presence of the gentle mutt. My house, once a silent crypt, hummed with life pancake breakfasts, board games on rainy nights, the soft strum of Daniel's guitar as he played old folk tunes. I'd watch them, my makeshift family, and feel a flicker of hope, a reason to fight the darkness inside me. Then, a miracle blindsided me, a twist of fate that rewrote my story. At my next appointment, Dr. Bradley looked baffled, his brow furrowed as he studied my chart under the fluorescent lights of his office. "Elizabeth, there's been a mistake," he said, his voice cautious, almost disbelieving. "The lab mixed up your tests with another patient's. You don't have cancer. It's severe gastritis and ulcers, painful, but treatable with medication and diet." I was stunned, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst. "I'm going to live," I whispered, tears spilling down my cheeks. He smiled, his eyes kind, a rare warmth breaking through his professional mask. "A long, happy life, Liz. I'm so sorry for the scare." I flew home, tears streaming, the Chicago skyline blurring through my windshield. I burst through the door, finding Daniel and Sarah in the kitchen. Sarah feeding Ranger scraps of chicken, Daniel chopping vegetables for dinner. "I'm not dying," I cried, my voice breaking with joy. They froze, then enveloped me in a hug, their arms a fortress against my fears. Ranger barked, his tail thumping the floor, as if he understood. For the first time in months, I felt weightless, alive, ready to fight for every moment. We celebrated that night with homemade lasagna and a bottle of sparkling apple cider, toasting 2 second chances to life reclaimed. But fate, that cruel trickster, loves to test the resilient. One humid July night in 2025, as fireflies danced in my backyard, Mark, drunk and raging, stumbled through my gate, his voice a slurred roar. "Sarah, Tommy, get out here," he bellowed, kicking over a flower pot, the ceramic shattering on the patio. Sarah, trembling, hid with Tommy in the guest room, her arms wrapped around her son, whispering reassurances. Daniel stormed outside, his eyes blazing, ready to protect his new family. I followed, my heart pounding, fear and fury warring within me. In the dim glow of the streetlight, a knife flashed. Mark lunged, and Daniel crumpled, blood pooling on the grass, a dark stain spreading across his shirt. "Die, you bastard," Mark hissed, his eyes wild with rage, before vanishing into the night. Sarah's scream pierced the air as she called 911, her voice shaking but resolute. I knelt beside Daniel, pressing a towel to his side, my nurse's training kicking in despite my panic. "Hold on, son," I whispered, my hands trembling, blood seeping through my fingers. "You're not leaving me, not now." The ambulance screamed through Lincoln Park, rushing Daniel to St. Mary's, The doctors, faces grim, said he needed emergency surgery and a blood transfusion, but his blood type was rare, a B negative with a unique phenotype, and the hospital's supply was dry, depleted after a recent pileup on the Kennedy Expressway. They searched the donor database, desperation mounting. Finally, a match. Paul Harrison, a 32-year-old businessman based in Lake Forest. He'd donated recently and was about to board a flight to New York for a deal that could make or break his logistics company. The hospital called, pleading, explaining a life hung in the balance. "I'm coming," Paul said, his voice steady over the phone. "No one dies on my watch." He canceled his flight, drove to St. Mary's, and walked into the waiting room, his presence a beacon of hope. When I saw him, I gasped, my heart stopping. He was Daniel's mirror, same dark curls, same piercing blue eyes, same strong jaw, even the same slight tilt of the head. "Daniel," I whispered, my voice trembling. He frowned, confused. "No, I'm Paul Harrison." It hit me like a freight train. 32 years ago, I'd assisted in an emergency C-section at St. Mary's. A young mother fighting for her life and her twins. The surgeon had saved her and her boys, both marked with identical oval birthmarks on their shoulders. I'd told Daniel about his possible twin months ago. When I noticed the mark on his shoulder while he chopped wood in my yard, he'd laughed it off, skeptical. But now here was Paul, his mirror image, saving his life. "You're his brother," I said, my voice breaking. Paul's eyes widened, disbelief warring with recognition. "I grew up in an orphanage," he said, "adopted by a wealthy family in Lake Forest. I never knew the surgery was a success." Paul's blood matched perfectly, pulling Daniel back from the brink. When Daniel woke, groggy but alive, he saw Paul and froze. "My brother?" he whispered, tears welling. Paul, his own eyes glistening, nodded. "I never knew about you," he said, his voice thick. "But I'm here now." They talked for hours, piecing together their mother's desperate choice. Clara, overwhelmed and broken, had kept Daniel but left Paul at an orphanage, unable to raise both on her own. The brothers forgave her, their bond instant and unbreakable. A miracle born from tragedy. Mark was arrested the next day. Still reeking of whiskey, his clothes stained with Daniel's blood, he confessed to the attack, his bravado crumbling under the weight of evidence. The court sentenced him to 7 years in prison and stripped him of parental rights, freeing Sarah to move forward. Daniel adopted Tommy after their wedding, a small ceremony in my backyard, with wildflowers tucked into Sarah's braid and a homemade carrot cake I'd baked with Tommy's help. Paul hired Daniel as a truck driver for his logistics company, helping him get a driver's license and training. With a steady job, a family, and a purpose, Daniel glowed, his rough edges polished by love. Tommy's stutter began to fade, surrounded by care and stability. He even befriended Ranger, the once scrawny dog, now thriving in a custom kennel Daniel built in my yard. They became inseparable, Tommy giggling as Ranger licked his face, his fear of dogs melting away. 6 months later, Sarah announced she was pregnant, her eyes shining as she shared the news over Sunday dinner. I wept, knowing I'd be a grandmother again, my heart overflowing. My house, once a silent crypt, thrummed with life. Daniel, Sarah, Tommy, Ranger, and soon, a new baby. Paul's family, his wife Emily, and their daughter, Lily, joined us for barbecues and game nights, blending into our patchwork plan. The neighbors, once skeptical, now stopped by with casseroles, awed by the family we'd built. One evening, as we sat around the table, Tommy giggling with Ranger, Sarah's hand on her growing belly, I looked at Daniel and Paul, their laughter echoing. I saw those twin boys from 32 years ago, now men, united by fate. This was my redemption, my Miracla family forged through pain, betrayal, and second chances. Every tear, every fight, every moment of despair had led me here. And as I held Tommy's hand, I knew I'd live not just a long life, but a life bursting with love, a legacy stitched together by grace. This is my story, my heart laid bare, and I'm never letting it go.